Welcome back to Corporate Fuckery, Stories of Survival, Psychological Warfare, and Choosing What's Best for You. I'm your host, Lauren DeGolia. Today's guest has spent more than 2 decades shaping global people strategy, most recently as a global talent management director, designing the systems that drive performance, retention, and revenue. She's coached more than 2,000 leaders, built enterprise-wide talent and succession strategies, reduced ramp-up time by 50%, improved engagement and retention year over year, and led large-scale restructures inside complex, high-growth organizations. She holds a master's in industrial organizational psychology and has been recognized by .com's Leadership 500 Awards, and has co-authored Best Practices in Training magazine. She understands how organizations think because she's helped architect the strategy. But most recently, as the global management director, she started seeing the writing on the wall. She knew that a layoff was imminent. Just as she expected, a 2-week severance was delivered up. Today, we're rewriting a rule, how to negotiate after layoff, because she knows what the standard is, what's flexible, and where leverage actually lives. Now, as the CEO of True North People Consulting, she brings a human-centered strategic lens to HR, proving that compassion and performance are not opposites. This conversation is about power, positioning, and protecting yourself when the system shifts. Let's get into it. Welcome, Tara Bodine.
Thank you.
Wow, you're welcome.
I seem pretty fabulous when you talk about me.
Well, because you are. I actually had this hit this morning. I was like, so many women downplay their extra. And I'm like, it's such a disservice to so many of us. Because when something like a layoff happens, all of that badassery just gets thrown out the window. And we forget. We forget that we've had major impact in organizations. We forget that we've been the reliable one and the dependable one and moved mountains when like nobody was looking. And then it feels like when we get laid off, we just get sucker punched and we're like, what the hell happened and how am I going to rebuild this?
It's so interesting because last week, I have an employee that works with me at True North, and she said to me, your clients don't even realize what you've done in your career. They know bits and pieces and how you help them, and they can kind of feel it. But she's like, they don't even realize that you have a master's degree in IO psychology or what you've done for these large scale organizations over the course of the 20 plus years you were there. So it is true. You do kind of forget to sell yourself. And some of that is impacted by how you're treated in corporate and how your identity and ego gets kind of shifted over time.
So let's start with Tara. What are you most proud of in your career? Toot your horn for a hot second. I'm going to put you on the hot seat.
I'm most proud of that I have been able to take my 20 plus years of corporate HR and business strategy experience and translate that into a business that helps small businesses, Main Street USA. I translate it from that big corporatized best practice theory into a way that just makes sense for smaller businesses. And I feel like I'm putting all of that experience to good use because it wasn't necessarily appreciated in the larger organizations I was in. They were definitely using people to be successful versus having them have great people experiences and that leading to success. So I feel like I spent a lot of time working in these corporations, being turned out, stressed out, trying to get them to buy in that people mattered. And now after that, I can take all of that time and experience and use it on, share it with small businesses, the hearts of our communities, and have them be successful and also have their people have really great experiences. And that doesn't mean we don't have hard conversations. We do. We have hard conversations. We sometimes have to part ways with people, but we do it in a way that blends compassion with business strategy. So I'm just proud because I had no idea how to start my own business. And I never thought I would be an entrepreneur. And I did that 2 years ago. And I'm extremely proud of it.
As you should be. And, today we're going to pull back the veil a little bit on HR because many of us, myself included, recognize that HR isn't actually there for the employee per se. And I want your opinion on that. We'll get to that in a second. But I want to talk about, when you're at an executive level, which is kind of what you most recently are departing out of the HR space, I think we just accept what we're given. Like, I just accepted what I was given when Microsoft laid me off, 8 months ago, 7 months ago. And that also feels shitty because you do know you're worth more and it's hard to use your voice in the opposite way of accepting your accolades or owning your badassery. It's like it's equally difficult to speak up for yourself against a machine that feels like it will just chew you up and spit you out tomorrow. So just for the listener listening in here, like we're going to go down the rabbit hole just a little bit on the HR side, the why HR does what it does and how it does it, because my friend Tara here, she knows where some bodies are buried in some of the organizations
It's so true.
that she's worked in. I know that for a fact. And I was friends with HR, specifically at Nordstrom. Like I had great HR relationships and like
Yeah.
they all knew what was going down with me and what had happened. And it is shocking that like no action was taken. So I want to give people a sense of like how do we equip them with information that's super useful when dealing with HR, when advocating for themselves so that that identity part that is so fragile in the corporate space doesn't have to feel like it's getting the wind knocked out of it every time something doesn't go the way that one would hope, like a layoff, for example.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting because I think HR falls into the bucket of a few different occupations where we forget to question that these are also humans. Like sometimes we forget like teachers are humans and they might have biases against one kid or another. And they don't even know that, right? So it's that HR is not all created equal, depending on the business and the people working. And there's kind of this old strategy or old way of doing HR, which is extremely company soldiered on the side of the organization. And then there's this newer part of HR where we're trying to be more strategic and more of that business partner and more influential, kind of like the neck turning the head of the organization, has a little bit more of an ability to influence how the business makes decisions and what's happening. But really, it does come down to what the company values, who they value, the relationships internally. So, I mean, sometimes you have to really think as somebody in a situation like, what am I dealing with here? Because you had a fantastic group of HR people that sounded to me like maybe they were kind of ineffective in that scenario you were in. Were they ineffective because they didn't try? They didn't know how to navigate it. They did try and they were told not to. And the company signs their paycheck in the long run. So there's been a lot of times that you die on a mountain as an HR person up through leadership, and that isn't the priority or that isn't the value of the company. And that's what I was up against for many years, joining companies that would tell me that people were a priority and they value what my values are, which is people and community and kind of being in it together for success. And a lot of times when like the rubber meets the road and things are stressful or hard, they feel like they have to choose and people are not the choice at that moment in time.
Yeah.
So I think it's important to know that ultimately HR is another employee at a company and they care about their livelihood like we all do. And they don't want to lose their jobs or be reprimanded, and they have to navigate whatever system is going on at the company as well. And sometimes that's not in the employee favor.
100%. And I could see just putting on my HR hat, which obviously I've never been an HR leader, but it's like there are so many fires that one could fight. Like HR could spend its day just navigating employee issues, and like that's exhausting. So it comes down to managing risk, which I believe of most HR employee management piece is all about risk to the organization. I don't believe that organizations are like, let me pay someone to just manage employee issues 100% of the time. Like the scope is much larger, and yet there is a perception from at least my side of the fence where it's like, no, you guys are just here to do people management.
I know my clients say that all the time. They're like, oh, this is HR, or like, this is what you do, because I'm very proactive and I'm very much like business strategy, people strategy, like, and then we do the reactive stuff as we need to. But I don't think any organization that is trying to be successful, no matter what their product is, whether they're nonprofit or for-profit, private or public sector, like nobody sets out to say, I want to hire a bunch of people that just put out fires and react to things that happen, right? Like that doesn't make a lot of sense. But they don't necessarily either when it comes down to the work and what's happening, they're not prioritizing the people, the being proactive around it. So you need to have the right type of HR people who have the business knowledge and the strategy that can say like, I see this coming. I'm going to proactively go to leadership and say, like, this is going to turn into a conflict, or this is going to end up being an issue versus, waiting for it to happen and react. But again, you need the right level person, the right person that's going to influence that. They need to be able to have a voice and be heard. And then you also deal sometimes with organizations, even leadership, they're bringing in their own baggage, right? Everyone's bringing in like
Oh my God,
their
so much
lens,
baggage. Yes.
the lens of whatever has happened. Everyone's looking through a different pair of glasses. So, I mean, I've worked for an organization where the leadership kept starting fires to put them out because they felt really good putting out fires. And that was maddening as an HR person because they're like, we don't have to make this a problem, but we have, and now we have to solve it and then pat ourselves on the back for solving it. So it's really like having the ability to navigate whenever the environment is in that organization, and it is full of people with different life experiences that you have to try to figure out as the HR person how to influence. So it's not easy. Most people tell me I'm like the least HRy person they've ever met because I'm like very casual, very down to earth, love to talk about business strategy even more than people. Like, I will do your handbook and I will write your policies, but that is not what really gives me like energy at the end of the day. It's figuring out what you're trying to accomplish and then how do you do it with your people on board, right? So like I think it's just different. It depends on the school of thought you were growing up in HR in and the experiences that you have.
I hear you. I want to transition into talking about your most recent layoff, knowing that, the world is experiencing layoffs at a rate that I don't believe we've ever experienced. I could go get some data on that. ChatGPT will help me tell any story that I want to tell, truly.
Yes.
But,
Yeah.
the Amazon layoffs of 14 and 16,000 people and the Microsoft layoffs. And we are definitely in a season of corporate fuckery right now that is beyond. And most of us can see the writing on the wall, like I alluded to in the introduction here. So I would love for you to just kind of, as a leader, knowing that something was coming for you, and you share as much or as little as feels comfortable for you, like what were you starting to prepare for? Like, what are some of the thoughts? What have you been managing? And like, if you wouldn't mind sharing a little bit about your story, just so that people can kind of understand like how you as an HR person are looking at this and preparing for this, knowing that the inevitable is coming.
Yes. And I mean, I think at this point in my career, when it comes down to a layoff or a reduction because of business need or the profitability issues, it is easier to see coming, certainly, than some other situations where people have been blindsided. So I have the benefit of having my business for the last several years and also having this other position, which they, were fully aware and supportive of me having a business. So I feel like I was in a different situation in that I had a seat at the table. I was a senior level human resources person. I knew what the financial situation was all through last year. I definitely didn't anticipate that my role would be eliminated for a long time. I thought we would do a reduction globally, but they brought in somebody new to lead the HR organization. And with that, we were kind of two senior level people being there. And a lot of my seat at the table, executive level work went to her. And I was left managing more local HR things in the US versus global influence. So at that point, you can kind of see the writing on the wall and see that it's coming. What's interesting for me is like the logical part of my brain is very understands it and is very conscious. Like, this is business. This has nothing to do with me. I'm a highly paid, high level employee. It makes sense to come to me like as one of the first people because of my salary. But walking that plank and anticipating that was extremely jarring to my nervous system. Also because it was done in a way that lacked any transparency. So prior to this, I had excellent relationships with our leadership team. I probably would have just expected more of a conversation, and that's how I've done it in the past. Hey, this is what we're doing. We're thinking about it. Can you kind of help us down this path? We'll part ways amicably. But it was done very secretively, very ostracizing. And no matter how much logic and experience you have, you're still a human being who are plugged in and invested time and energy into an organization and people, and it still hurts. And it's still hard to reconcile. And then very strangely, I received a meeting invitation. It was sent to me on a Wednesday for Friday morning. And it was about talking about the changes to my role. So I thought that was also interesting because in my career, I have never given somebody 2 days to kind of stir and think about, ruminate over what might be happening.
I mean, that just feels torturous to me. That feels absolutely inhumane to make an employee sit there for 48 hours and wonder what's coming and
Yeah.
not be willing to have any sort of compassion for what it's doing to their nervous system, what it's doing to their productivity. Like that person would have been better off getting you on the phone that day and being like, hey, we're figuring some things out. We need to have a transparent conversation. Here's what the topic is about. But again, like there is this risk aversion of like treating people like people in a corporate setting where you're never going to know how people are going to react because psychological safety isn't something that's actually focused on in terms of creating safe environments to have difficult conversations. And so then, however, that person's glasses portray, whatever your reaction is going to be, like they're bracing for that version of you, not the version of you that can actually show up like a professional. So I am so sorry that that happened to you because that would have eaten me alive for 48 hours.
It definitely was stressful. I responded immediately and asked for a meeting sooner, and it was declined. I think I've talked about this before, like I've done compassionate termination webinars and things, and there's like two things that go on. Like one, the company goes into protect mode, and so they follow this like old school checklist handbook of like, keep everything secretive and to protect yourself and follow this process. It's really hard to do that to the HR person that has access and has knowledge. So it seems kind of counterintuitive because you're actually just making the situation worse by doing that. There is some risk involved, I guess, in having the conversation up front. But I would argue there's as much risk in creating an acrimonious situation with the person as well.
Yeah.
And then the second thing is just cognitive dissonance. Like nobody wants to feel like the bad guy, right? They don't want to make it. People have a hard time reconciling having these hard conversations and making these hard decisions. I mean, I had relationships with close relationships with the senior leaders, CEO, et cetera, and I never heard from them. Like no one ever contacted me. Like they just sort of disappeared. And I think it's because they have a hard time just saying, this really stinks and we don't want to have to do this, but we have to. And instead, they kind of want to make it about you or they want to avoid it entirely. And that's just your brain protecting itself and its own nervous system. So I get that. When I signed on to the conversation that Friday, the leader of HR is not from the US. So it was evident that, she was very scripted because this is not her level of experience. And I get that. So I'm sure it had to be really difficult for her. And it was very much, this is a reduction due to the financial situation of the company. Your performance has been great. Like you've been very professional. Today is your last day and we'll be providing you a separation agreement, all again, cookie cutter, best practice. And then when I asked how long the severance was, she told me 2 weeks. And I mean, that was what really surprised me. And
how long had you been at the organization for?
Just a little under 2 years. And I think they had to say like 1 week per year. And people do that, right? They create a formula of 2 weeks per year.
Yeah.
In my prior HR roles, whenever I had to do a reduction, we looked at a number of factors. We looked at certainly tenure and time in the organization, but we also would take into account level of role and also age, because in the US, when you're over 40, you're in a protected class, and there's rationale and reason behind that, which is maybe it's a little bit harder for you or it might take a little longer to find work given either your level or your age. So I would really, again, part of a compassionate separation is not only providing a package that's adequate for the person that you're parting ways with, it's also considering some of those intangibles that are not monetarily related. I've seen organizations, actually JustWorks did a layoff last year and they handled it really well on paper. I don't know how it actually went down internally, but they put out a letter and posts on their website about it. But I mean, I've seen organizations let people keep their equipment, right? Keep your
Yep.
laptop. They
Yep.
do job placement, job coaching. They put together resume books and hand it out to their competitors to say, we laid off all these people. They're going to fit in your organization because they fit in ours. So I've seen companies try to do something compassionately to support people on the exit. This scenario for me, while extremely, I think, not surprised by the fact that that was happening, given the fact that I had been completely isolated for the weeks leading up until that point, it was just landed very cold. It was like, very used feeling like you gave your contributions, you were great. We paid you too much. Now you need to go. And we're going to give you the minimal amount of money. Good luck finding, another job at your senior level in the next 2 weeks, So it just.
Love and light. Let's
Yeah.
talk a little bit about being a woman over 40. And this theme keeps coming up kind of in some of these conversations. I spoke with Dr. Corinne Lowe last season about kind of the economics of women in the workplace. If you want to go back and listen to that episode, I think it's episode 9 of season 2. But she's absolutely right in the sense of there is a long-term impact to people's identity, to people's ability and willingness to show up in their next work environment in a way that is productive and meaningful and values aligned. And I think we miss a lot of the point when we start thinking about laying people off and the trauma that just gets taken to the next organization with you based on the last experience you had. So I would love for you to talk a little bit about that, because I think that there's more here than meets the eye, especially in the work I know that you do also with the subconscious mind and just knowing the impact and the lenses that people are bringing to work. Like, this is a really big deal that doesn't ever get discussed.
And companies aren't taking the accountability that they should be for the impact and the energy that this is pouring out into the world. They're looking at it as a responsibility to their investors. And that is certainly an important aspect of business.
Yes.
And they want to keep their doors open. But there is some level of accountability on the human side that I don't feel is taken. And it's actually avoided because it's hard, it's painful. And a lot of these people who are in the positions of making these decisions haven't had the chance to do the work on themselves or to be able to say, like, this sucks and I can still do this in like a humane, compassionate way. They go into like very much protect mode. And I think, there's a couple of things here. One, like when you are given a separation agreement and a severance package, you are being asked to waive your rights to sue that company, disparage that company. The consideration for your signature needs to be worth it, right? We kind of sometimes don't think about that. We just think about it as like, I need some kind of soft landing to get me to my next gig. I have a family, right? Bills. But like what they're asking for you to do is actually waive rights. So we have to think about the impacts of that. And then, yes, absolutely. You go out there and you're like, I'm trying to find a new role. And I have to tell the story of how I lost my job. Maybe I've lost my job before. Maybe I've had a few layoffs in my career. Over a 20-year career, you're going to have a few layoffs going to happen. Now I have to tell that story. I'm over 40. Sometimes companies are trying to hire in younger talent. They can tell my age just based on how long I've been in the workforce. I've had job coaches over the years tell me to take my years, like take my degree years off my resume. It blows my mind. It does like kind of work against you. So it's just getting the job. And then, like you said, you arrive and then you have all of this trauma that you're bringing with you. And that impacts the contributions you make to the next organization and how you interact with people and how worried you are. You have to
and how successful you're going to be, but actually your success trajectory, because all of those patterns, all of that imprint on your mind and what has happened previously, your brain is anticipating that that's going to happen again, which is why you carry such performative anxiety into your next role. Because you're like, I don't want this to go the way that Nordstrom went. I don't want this to go the way that Microsoft went.
Nobody can do their best work when they're afraid. You just can't.
Yeah.
You're in survival mode. You are not able to access those parts of your brain to do your best thinking, to do your innovative thinking when you are worried and stressed and fearful of what could be happening and reading between lines to whether or not you're safe.
Yep.
And
And
so, yeah,
somebody,
you're absolutely right. It impacts your whole success and how you do in relationships, in the actual work. It kind of seeps out of you.
it does. And somebody just sighed because they're like, and that's the game, like playing whack-a-mole every single day. Like my inbox is full. I'm back to back. I'm triple booked. I have all this shit. I have a whole team that relies on me. And like, duh, I'm in survival mode and I'm just trying to keep it together. And it's like, girl, we see you. Like, we're right here with you because we've been there. Like, both of us have been there.
Yep.
And this isn't a sustainable or scalable way, A, to lead yourself, B, to lead an organization, or C, to even think that this is going to be a trajectory that's going to keep you going towards the things that you want. It's like seeing the fork in the road and there's a sign that says dangerous cliff, but everything's overgrown and you take that path anyway. And like, you know that the cliff is coming, like you can feel it because our bodies, our nervous systems were not wired to go through this amount of stress. And then when the layoff hits, what that does to our reptilian brain in terms of survival and keeping a roof over our head and food in our bellies, like we're not even talking about the identity part at this point. It's like we just want to survive. And we've built our whole career and identity around this part of ourselves. So, Tara, like, I know we're kind of going long way around here, but it's like, how do you as a leader then go back to an organization post layoff and say, hey, like 2 weeks of severance is not representative of my contribution and my role here, and I'm going to need you to rethink your thoughts.
Yeah. So I assess the situation, right? So depending on what I see from my experience, and because my experience was very isolating, it was very secretive. Some of the things that they did on my last day were pretty terrible. During my conversation, I had the wherewithal to actually push back and say, this is completely inappropriate. I'm asking that you reconsider, given my level, scope, contributions. It was pretty much, again, this person doesn't have that level of experience to know how to respond in a legal way. So it was just kind of like, well, you'll get the document and you can review it. At that point, knowing what I was up against, I moved forward to hiring counsel and to pursuing what I believe is a very fair severance. I'm not looking for a windfall or to make a ton of money off this organization. I'm just looking for a little bit of runway to make sure that I can keep my family safe. And to your point, my identity is not invested in this organization. A few years ago, I lost my job and my identity. And that was blindsiding, and I didn't see that coming. And that's where True North People Consulting came from. And that's where my identity is today. But it still messes with your nervous system. You still have to do the work. I'm tapping and breathing and doing all the things because it's tapping into all of those insecurities about financial safety, family, reputation. Did I do something wrong? It reaches right in and finds all of those
Like shakes
subconscious
it.
fears and they come right up to the surface and we're right back at it doing the work again. And it's really tough. And it's tough to advocate for yourself when you're in that situation,
Yeah.
but you can and you should.
You can and you should. And it's really interesting that you say that because I met you right after that layoff or right as that layoff was happening. I don't remember the exact timing, but I recall we had a networking conversation back then.
Yep.
And I will say, between the leaving Nordstrom and what happened to me there and then getting laid off from Microsoft, I had the exact same nervous system fuckery that was going on with me. And I couldn't tell immediately what was going on with I'm like, this feels like so extra. Now, granted, I was also dealing with grief and other things.
Yeah.
And so it was an amplified situation, but I recognized that I was having the same nervous system. And that's because our subconscious mind remembers. She's like an elephant. She doesn't forget how you went through all the cycles
Right.
before.
Right.
So it's so
Right.
easy when something that even rears its head that's like, hey, girl, like this feels similar. It might be an apple and an orange, but it's still a fruit. And your nervous system is going, oh my God, like you fucked it up. Oh my God, you shit the bed. Like, oh my God, what did you do? Like, why did you do this? And so I had to take a step back and I had to say to myself, Lauren, this isn't the same thing. Like we're not in the same place. There's been 5 or 6 years of growth. We've like moved mountains of whatever. And like sitting with yourself in that moment and being like, this actually isn't saying about me what internally those thoughts are. Remember, we don't have to entertain every thought that comes through our brain. And recognizing like what's actually true, I think is such a huge part of moving through this with more self-compassion than anything that anybody could ever do for themselves.
I mean, I think it might have been in one of your recent podcasts or something that I was reading or listening to, talks just about our nervous system and what it's designed for. And it can't tell the difference between social anxiety and the actual bear chasing you, right? Because when we were in the tribe, like social anxiety was life threatening.
Yep.
So yeah, it's like I'm like, I feel like I'm being chased by a bear. I feel like I'm being chased by a bear. I'm safe, right? I'm safe, but it's triggering and it doesn't, I don't think it's not like only some people are going to feel it. Like you're going to feel it.
Right.
It doesn't matter if you've done all the work. It doesn't matter if you didn't care about the situation or whatever. Like it's still going to impact you and your nervous system in some ways. And you have to give yourself the compassion and the understanding and have the tools then to work through it.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's a situation that sucks. Like nobody wants this.
Nobody wants this. If we were to pull back the HR veil just a little bit more and look at the system of HR within a broader organizational system, and the listener here today is really here because she or they want to choose what's best for them in this environment. And we can agree that HR isn't necessarily always there for the employee. In fact, they're more often there to manage the risk of the organization. But they do play a pivotal role in the emotional intelligence of an organization and helping to navigate the landscape of being a human in this system. So what would your advice be for someone who is coming to work every day feeling like they're in survival mode or getting wrapped up in some of these office politics or layoff dynamics that are feeling really difficult?
Yeah, it's tough. The first thing that came to mind was my time spent in corporate HR was really spent helping leaders symptoms, right? I think the difference is that when you're classically trained in psychology and HR, you understand some of the fundamentals of like human behavior and human dynamic and behavior reinforcement and all of those things. You start to look at, like I used to say to my leaders, it's like a 3-layer cake, right? You have the symptoms are like whatever you're seeing from people. And then you have the behaviors that are driving that. And then the very last thing is like their why. And usually organizations never get down to the third layer. They don't think it's their place to like analyze what's going on with you on that third layer. They care about the behaviors and like what's coming to the surface from them. So it's like a salesperson is not making enough sales. And then they look at the behaviors and they don't have enough activity, but they're not going down the extra layer to think like, oh my gosh, this person actually has like focus issues and they can't figure out how to organize their time to make enough calls. So they're getting stuck in their own head. But if we took the time to get down to that layer and like, why are they there? Because they're insecure. If they make the right, then we actually can change and coach people to be successful. So it's like, you have to get down to the third layer. So that would be my advice to leaders and to HR professionals, which is spend the time teaching people how to dig down and figure out what's holding them back, because it's worth the energy. Sometimes you can't. The person has to be willing, and not all of us are willing to dive deep and to change or to be coachable, but most people are. Most people want to do a good job, and I think that's time well spent by people at work to say like, these are human beings. There's rationale driving their behaviors. There's subconscious things driving their behavior. Yes. Let me try to understand that. That's root cause, right? That's a business practice, root cause analysis.
Yep.
We should do that on people. And then for the employee that's in survival mode and just in trying to get by, it's doing what you can do to take your control back. Whatever you can do each day to make you feel like you're in control. For some people, that's pulling their resume together, or networking, or applying to a job. For other people, it's that are burnt out. It's the opposite of burnout. It's really inspiration. It's doing something different, like doing a craft when you get home, or it's just figuring out ways for you each day to feel like you're in some control of your life and that it fits into the bigger picture. Because ultimately, while it's traumatizing, absolutely, we all carry that with us. we know that in a year or 5 years, it's just a blip in our story to where we're headed. So it's like being able to figure out, and because you get like tunnel vision when you're in it, you're like in it and
Yeah.
it's all you think of and all you feel.
Yeah.
And being able to take yourself out of it, I think can help you regulate a little bit.
I would agree. And I would also say to that, like, we talk a lot about burnout. What we don't talk about in that burnout is like 90% of that burnout is actually just survival mode. And there's different
Yeah.
levels of burnout. Someone online was talking about the 5 levels of burnout. I'll have to refresh my memory on
Oh,
that.
interesting.
Yeah, but it was like the honeymoon of like just doing a little bit more. And like burnout comes from just doing a little bit more than what you're responsible for. And then it's doing a little bit more. Burnout is actually just doing more and not actually getting your cup refilled. And what I have a really hard time with, because I think back to, 2017, 2018, Lauren, who was grinding her ass, who was like trying to go to yoga twice a week. And she would find reprieve for 45 minutes on the yoga mat and then walk in the door. And it was like, walking right back into all the shit again and going like, why did I just spend 45 minutes to walk right back into the same level of frustration? And I think what's really important is the work when you're in that place and like you hate your job or you're in a toxic environment or you're like, I got to find more of time for me or decompression. A lot of us take that shit to therapy. I don't know about you, Tara, but it's like your therapist knows all of your people. Like she's got all the story. He, she, he, they have got all the stories. And now you're investing your hard-earned money in therapy, trying to be like, hey, how do I unfuck how I think about this? And the reality is like, that's even a signal that your identity in your work is way too far integrated. If you are taking your work to therapy and trying to like decouple yourself. And so it's like, taking a step back and looking at your work information more as data and being like, what am I experiencing here? And how can I detach myself and just look at this as information instead of it meaning something about me? And that's really hard to do for people who want to go into a work environment and just do a good job because it's a slippery slope. It's like doing a good job means the bar is here and the bar only continues to raise the wall, as you know. And it's like our job then to choose what's best for us becomes really looking at what we can control and how we're going to show up and practice changing our relationship with what doing a good job actually means to us.
It's interesting because we're not going to go down the rabbit hole of like societal gender norms and all that, but like many, many women are just raised in an environment to be people pleasers. I'm definitely a recovering people pleaser. And so I always viewed burnout. Certainly, I think for some people, it is taking on more, getting more debits than credits. I also view it as being a chameleon and trying to pivot and adapt and fit into every situation to be like, I'm here, I'm flexible, I'm doing what you asked me to do, I'm doing it, I'm great. I need, like, I want to be good, I want to do a good job. And that is your identity. Like, I'm feeling good about myself at work. I'm feeling like I'm doing what they ask, what they want. I'm making an impact. I'm helping people, whatever it is. But it's like you are usually asked to adapt and pivot and change and sacrifice. And you do it and you do it and you do it. And then it still maybe ends with a layoff or termination or whatever. And you're like, what did I do wrong? So it's like, how do we separate that? Like, there's work there. You're right. I have a therapist. I've had her for like 5 years. I love her. She definitely has had me work through a lot of work shit over the years. And it's like, how do we separate ourselves? How do we do it?
Mine knew because I was going through a situation where, my boss got someone pregnant in another part of the organization. I mean, it was so much, dude. Like it was and then my reputation. I mean, not many people know that. I'm not going way down the rabbit hole there either. But it's like, I used to call myself Gumby because I would just Gumby myself. And I know I'm dating myself for those of you who don't know what Gumby is. He's a claymation figure from the 80s, I believe, maybe 70s.
80s. Very flexible.
He's very flexible and he just contorts himself into whatever is needed. And so I was the Nordstrom female version of Gumby and girlfriend was exhausted. She was exhausted. And so that's why, when we think about this work and we think about the badges of honor that we carry and all the great things that we do. And then, when the layoff or severance comes, it's like Gumby falls apart. Like girlfriend just disintegrates because your whole identity was the Gumby. And
you lost your sense of self.
Yeah, you lose your sense of self. And then for somebody to be like, just go to yoga, just do some breath work. Like, it feels so insulting. It's like, shut the fuck up. Like, you don't even know that I just feel like I got punched in my soul. Like, my gut is just, I will not get over this. And that's really, I mean, those are all thoughts that have been rewired. And I agree with you, societally speaking, about what our career and what our success actually looks like. And so, I'll let you respond. And then I think we're at a good place to wrap this episode up.
Yeah. So I'm laughing because I had this reflection. So when I was in my early 20s, I had graduated with my master's degree. I was extremely proud of that. I put myself through school and I was very ambitious, and I just wanted to climb the HR ladder, and I wanted to prove that I could do a great job and increase my level, increase my pay, by hard work, earn it, right? And so I just did that. I worked really, really hard and took every opportunity I could and went above and beyond. And then I remember like in my late 30s, I was like slammed, right? Like I was at a higher level HR role and I was like, couldn't see the forest of the trees. I was buried. And I'm like, what did I get here? Like I went from wanting more and taking on more work and being ambitious and climbing that ladder to being like, I am so overwhelmed all the time. I'm stressed. And I kept telling myself, just get through your to-do list and you'll be okay. Like, get through your to-do list and you'll be okay. And then when I was 40, I was like, holy shit, I have 25 years left in the workforce. Maybe I should cool it a little bit. I don't need to be the most overachieving HR person. But it's like this journey that no one told me. No one tells you when you're 25 and you grew up in kind of a poor family and you know that you have the braids and you have the education and that you're going to work hard and you're going to be successful financially. But you just don't know or see coming the politics of that until again, a decade later.
Until it's too late, actually.
And then you're in it and then you're like, crap, whole identity has become this. And without it, I don't know who I am. I don't even know what I did the last 10 years. I blacked out for it all, right? Who was Tara or who is Tara without HR? I didn't, even know that, right? So it is so interesting, the dynamic that work plays in our capitalism society and especially for.
I would completely agree with you. And if I were to look at 28-year-old Lauren, who very similar to you, and my therapist, if she was here right now, would tell you that Nordstrom Lauren was so seduced by success that she was willing to do anything. That's why the Gumby. And that was very much a reflection of the financial instability that I grew up with. And I'm like, fuck that. I am not going to recreate that for myself. I am going to bet on myself. I'm going to create what I want. And truly, Tara, I did it. I did it on so many levels.
Yeah.
But it's if I were to go back and tell 28-year-old Lauren a little bit about the politics that she was going to navigate, because I traversed 3 separate industries over about a 12-year period. And I mean, that was kind of a big deal because my skills weren't fully translatable. So and I think I talked about this in a podcast episode previously, but it's when I told my husband I was going to go work for Nordstrom Technology as a leader in engineering at the time for another organization, he was like, and he wasn't trying to be a dick, but he was like, that's really cute. Are you sure? And I was like, I'm going to go do it. Watch me hold my beer. But it's you got to understand your goals. Where I think as high achieving women actually get around the axle a little bit is we want to do way more than what's written down on the piece of paper that says this is how we're contributing to the organization. And that, from an HR perspective, is our annual goals. And at Microsoft, that was happening twice a year. That is literally the only thing you're being measured on at the end of the day for how you're impacting an organization. Yes, you can keep going above and beyond. Yes, you can keep getting creative in how you're trying to do your work. Go do it. But please know that at the end of the day, they're going to pull up those goals. They're going to look at how you're perceived in the organization and who knows you for what. And that's the only way that you're actually going to get measured. So everything else above and beyond is on you.
Yeah. And that's the company that has the goal situation set up, right?
Yeah.
A lot of companies don't even have that. I think it's interesting because 25-year-old and 28-year-old Lauren and Tara, they were climbing the ladder. And then 40-year-old Tara was sitting at the boardroom table looking around, making the salary at the level I wanted, listening to these leaders, mostly men, drop F-bombs and curse at people and yell at people and on paper say that they had fantastic missions and they were contributing, to people and society, and just listen to them be complete assholes. And I remember being like, this is it? Like, I've made it. Like, I've made this. I don't even know who I am. I have no time for my kids. I'm working a million hours and I don't even feel good about it because it's not like really quality ad work.
Yep.
Like, what are you doing here?
Yeah. So anyway, all that to say, I know we kind of digress, but I think it's really important when you think about where you're at today, how burnt out you feel, and I'm using air quotes for that, and identifying where you can start looking at the system, your identity, how you want things to be, and really start parsing that apart and looking at it as the observer of your life instead of like making it mean so much. This is a job that pays you money. Yes, you need money to survive. Yes, you need money to feel the level of success that you have achieved. And there is so much more to living life than this kind of tug of war that you're playing with yourself every single day.
Right. And we feel trapped. We feel trapped and we don't feel like we have options, which makes us feel like we have no control. And we do have options, and they're not always easy, and people are out of work for long periods of time. And I don't want to take away from that because it's true, but you do have choices and options. And a lot of times what I do is I meet with employees who are struggling through this and help them navigate, just to make them feel like it's not all on like the company's control. Like you have a say.
Yeah.
They're not like holding you hostage here, right? We can do this.
They aren't holding you hostage. It does feel like that. So if we want to tie this episode up with a nice bow on like renegotiating after layoff and like, I mean, really learning how to choose yourself in an environment here that isn't necessarily set up for your success. You've designed your own path to success. Like what would your rule be, and how do you want the listeners to walk away with our insights from today?
Yeah, it's to start looking at who you are outside of your chosen profession and what you do, and have that be a practice that you do every day. And I think it's be resourceful. If you're feeling trapped, if you're feeling like you're in survival mode, if you're feeling like you can't see the forest or the trees, there are people around you who can, right? There are people, like there are friends, there are family, there are people that are experts, there are people that are willing to share their stories or their expertise. So it's like, reach out, phone a friend and build that community. Community is like my number one value in life. And so it's find the community of people that are going to carry you through. I mean, that's what, when I found you and that networking group, like that community carried me through that transition in my life. And then, and it's the same now, right? We keep going through things and we support one another. So it's like, you're not in it alone, and you're also not defined by whatever this company has decided you are.
I agree with you. And that's a beautiful way to end all the things. And thank you so much for being here today, Tara. Much appreciated. And I look forward to talking with you again soon.
Thank you for having me.
Before we close this out, I want you to hear this clearly. If a company decides you are no longer needed, that doesn't mean you're done. It means the org chart moved. That's it. A budget shifted, a strategy changed, and a leader made a call. What it does not mean is that your contribution evaporated. Now let's talk about the part that no one says out loud. It actually has major consequence on your nervous system. Your body reads any layoff or shift in your work environment that you weren't expecting as a threat. Your chest might tighten, your sleep probably gets weird, your brain starts scanning your entire career for proof that you messed something up. And your ego, it takes a hard hit, not because you're fragile, but because you're human. When you've invested identity, effort, reputation, and years into something, of course it stings. But here's the reframe. Discomfort doesn't equal powerlessness. You have leverage here, even if the company would prefer you believe you don't. A severance agreement isn't charity, it's an exchange. They are asking you to sign something, and that signature has value. So you are allowed to negotiate. You are allowed to stand up and say, this doesn't reflect my level of tenure or my impact. And you are allowed to ask for more runway. That isn't being difficult. That's being self-led. If the idea of speaking up makes your throat close, that's not weakness. That's conditioning. We've been trained to keep the peace, not rock the boat, and to be grateful for whatever we're given. So don't navigate this alone. Get resourced. Call a friend who can think clearly when you can't. Talk to someone who understands the mechanics, HR professionals, legal counsel, a coach, someone who can help you translate corporate language into actual options. Borrow someone else's certainty until yours comes back online, because you're not the first person this happened to, and you won't be the last. But you do get to decide what happens next. Tara, thank you so much for being here today and for your honesty and for reminding people that compassion and strategy can coexist. And to those of you listening, I want to remind you to take one action that's going to allow you to begin to choose yourself. Remember, this system isn't built for your humanity, but you are built to choose what is best for you. I'm Lauren DeGolia. This is Corporate Fuckery, and I will see you next week.